Hi, all. I'm Cullen Haynes, and welcome to Law Live. My next guest is known in the inner circles as the law firm whisperer, over 3 decades in law, and I'm very, very proud to say she's a dear friend of mine. I'm going to bring on Andrea Foot from Leaf Logic. Andrea, how are you? What's happening on your side of the world?
Hello, Cullen. Always excitable to meet you.
It's always excitable. And we're not broadcasting from the UK. You are in Australia right now,
Yep,
correct?
I'm in country Australia, watching a storm out of my window.
Of
So no,
course,
it's
of course.
awesome to be with you. My challenge is remaining calm.
Calm, collected, as cool as a cucumber. And I always say things don't just happen, they happen just. We were having some technical issues before, but let me tell you, we got them sorted. And it's now crystal clear. And we've already got Carl joining saying hi. Thank you, Carl Buchholz, for tuning in. So, look, I have to ask you, what is happening in your circle of influence there, Andrew?
So just before we start, I just wanted to acknowledge the lands upon which I'm coming to you from.
Oh,
So
of
I'm
course.
talking to you
Of
from
course.
the Gundagara and Tharawal people's lands. Here in the Southern Highlands in Australia.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful.
uh, it's very cold, so they were very brave to live here. So really what's on my mind, and it's very rainy right now, on my mind right now, I've got 3 big areas that are rumbling around. The first is the work that I'm doing with my clients. So I've got
Yes.
long-standing and new ones. Sometimes
Yes.
I have people I work with for years. Sometimes I just see people for 2 or 3 sessions, and then they've done their thing and they move on. So that's at the top of my mind. I'm thinking about my learning program, because you never know enough. There's always more to be found. So I'm thinking
Always.
about a research program for looking at the intersection of gender equity in law firms and the intractable problem of you have so many women coming into the law and then they evaporate when they hit a senior associate tier. So I'm looking at a research structure around that. And then I've got something personal on my mind, which is my mum has been out from the UK and I haven't really been with her for 4 years because of COVID, and she goes home today. So
Oh, my goodness.
part of me is focused on this, and part of me is happy, sad that I have been with her and that she's going. So that's a little bittersweet. So there's a bit of human stuff going on too.
Well, thank you for making time for us with your mother visiting. That's very kind
Oh,
of you.
it's important. This stuff's good.
Absolutely. And I would highly recommend, I've got this great clock phone app from Andrea that you got me on. It's 12:33 in Sydney on Wednesday, the 29th. If you have any burning questions for this powerhouse, please, we're broadcasting live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook right now. It's happening now. So put your questions in and make sure you say hello. We've got Hafiz saying hi from Chad. Hey, Hafiz, thanks for joining in. As always, my friend. This is an interesting one. It's a fun question. How would you describe your life either at the moment or your life in general using just film titles, Andrea?
Okay, so that was a gnarly one, Cullen. You always you with the thoughtful questions. I came up with 2 films for my work now. The first is a film called The Hunt for the Wilder People. I don't know if you've ever seen it, by
I've never
Taika,
seen it.
by Taika Waititi, who's a legend from New Zealand. But it's
Yes, he
really
is.
looking at it. It's recognizing. Fundamentally, it's about recognizing the light and the shadow sides in ourselves, and
Okay.
then the depth of relationship, the real value, transformative value of deep relationships with people you wouldn't expect, maybe people you didn't get on with. So it's beautiful and funny and wry and weird and New Zealand and awesome. You want to see that? And the other one that just comes, I watch again and again right now. It's really been for the last few years. It's a film called Soul from Pixar. I know
Oh, I've seen
you've
this.
got
I've seen
your
this on
new
the
baby.
Disney.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yes.
A beautiful. It's a children's film. It's a beautiful, profound, thoughtful reflection on our to get us to reflect on our why, not just our personal ambitions. Why are we here?
Yes.
What do we value?
Yes.
What do we really? What do we really? Why are we here? What are you doing this for? So it's beautiful, and it's also got some amazing music by 2 very diverse groups. One is the Nine Inch Nails composers,
Yes.
and band
It's Trent
members. That lady
Reznor, I
sounds.
think, right? Is
It
that
is,
right?
yeah, yeah. I just sounded very geriatric then. The composers of the Nine Inch Nails.
Of the Nine Inch Nails,
marvelous,
absolutely great.
Very fond of their latest
yes.
oeuvre, but they do the electro composer piece, and then John Baptiste, who does all the jazz work. So it is epic. If you haven't seen it, for me, it resonates so deeply in a beautiful way, and it's aimed at children, so it has to be incredibly clever and incredibly understandable. I commend it to every grown-up.
Okay, Soul, I've written that down, and I've got Benji, our 10-week-old, who is raring to get on to. So he's just been finishing some 17th century Proust. So he needs to get on something.
It's the next great work.
Yeah, I know. Soul from Disney. So you've given me something to think about, and I do like the director Waikari. I think he's very good on Jojo Rabbit. Was one of my favorite movies I recently saw too. Absolutely fantastic.
And somebody who thinks outside the box, and somebody who is not of the system, and somebody who, many, many, many layers to it. So get out there, go watch it, be bemused.
Go watch it.
Brilliant.
Oh, bemused. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Another classic of his is What We Do in the Shadows. I think if you haven't seen that, life as a vampire in the modern day, it still tickles me pink every time I watch it.
He just kills me. It's brilliant. So yes, they are films. So I tend to come to things again and again, and they are two that I will watch and rewatch as food.
Okay. So the second one was Soul, and what was the first one for those tuning in now?
Hunt for the Wilder People.
Hunt for the Wilder People. All right, I'm wagering we may be able to get that on some streaming platform. So leave that with me. Hunt for the Wilder People. Fantastic. Now, what is it like, switching gears a little bit, Andrea, what is it like to be the law firm whisperer?
So I was thinking about this, and for me, every day is a journey into the unknown, which one of the interesting things in our world, particularly in law, is people are positioned and valued as experts. And so for the coach, there can be a real kind of attraction to being an expert, but actually when you're working with an individual or a group, only Cullen is an expert on Cullen. As a coach for you, I can only guide, support, provoke, but I take something called a person-centered approach, which is about seeing the individual as a whole and as a unique whole. So there's a tendency to want to have types and archetypes, as tests to show whether you're a this, that, or the other. The reality is that Cullen is Cullen, Benji is Benji, Andrea is Andrea, and we're all different. So my work is about sitting with somebody, with the person at the center of my focus, and to look at them as a whole and not as a type or a position. So it helps me frame my attention when I'm working with somebody. And how often do we get somebody to pay attention to us fully?
That's a good point. Really, and literally give them your full attention. Not, I often hear that people don't really listen anymore. They just wait for their turn to talk, which is what you usually find. You can see it in people's eyes when they're doing it. So I'm on the same page with you there, Andrea, and it's very much almost an anti-Jungian philosophy. I know Jung had his 4 archetypes, put people in boxes, but once you label me, you negate me. So what I love about what you do is you're really putting the person at the center and actually catering it all about them.
And ending from a position of not knowingness. So it's not that I don't have an idea of what I'm doing and I don't have a framework and a set of things, but to actually, I think the death of a coach is to come in with a sense of I've got this and I know what they're like.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Because I don't
one size fits all. Yes.
Yeah, and my perspective of you, Cullen, was completely readjusted when I saw your story about Benji. I just thought that was the most profound, deep, generous, challenging, everything, all the things. And you became a person. You became a fleshed out person then, more of a fleshed out individual to me.
Rather than a cartoon character on LinkedIn. Absolutely.
Rather than a very, very precisely laid out individual who's presenting a mask, an image. So, and then another piece for my work is the idea of something called systems psychodynamics, which is unapologetically focused around thinking about the unconscious. So organizations like to talk about organizational structures and roles and hierarchies. Behavior is unconscious, and we ignore when it's not quite right. And so part of my role with group individuals and groups is to sit with the group and notice the unconscious behaviors that are happening. Because if we can do that, and I can get people to think about it a little bit, then they can start to change. I can't make you change, but you can start to think about it. So that's what it's like. It's unknown. It's not being an expert, and it's being prepared to look at some of the messier, ickier sides of what's happening amongst us.
It's very much a Stoic philosophy. It's like admitting that you know nothing and going with an empty cup and looking to fill what you can from that person that's in front of you.
And resisting the seduction on the coach to be the expert. Sometimes people will be very, they want you, it's outsourcing your anxiety. You know what it is. You know the answer, but actually only Cullen knows the answer for Cullen.
Good point. So it's a great lead into the next question. Do you advocate your clients that you deal with to stretch themselves and think outside the box? Is that part of what you do?
That's a really, I pondered that for quite a bit, the idea of thinking outside the box. And I think for me, it's more about when somebody comes to me, all sorts of levels and types of people come to me, it's because they've got something itching at the back of their mind, but they can't quite put their finger on it. So it's more about actually looking in the box.
Okay. Rather than what's outside of it.
And that ultimately lets them then step beyond it. So if you have I was thinking about an example where I've got I've worked with somebody in the past. She has always been frustrated because her team won't step up and take responsibility. But over time, what we've worked out is her behavioral role in making them behave, encouraging their behavior. So that aspect of, until you know what's happening for you, it's very easy to push it on everybody else. Until you have a sense of what's happening for you, what's in the box, and can tolerate looking into the dark corner and going, oh, that's actually a bit ugly and a bit horrible, or I don't like it, or I never thought. Once you can start to think about that stuff, then you have a chance to start recognizing it. You don't fix it necessarily, but you go, there's that thing that makes me frightened, angry, bad-tempered, grumpy. I recognize it. I'm not just going to respond to it now. I'm going to put it on a shelf and I'll focus on what I have to get done.
It's it's quite a cathartic exercise, it would seem. Very liberating, I'd wager.
It can be. It can be quite drawn out. It can be quite drawn out, and it's a very, ultimately it's how safe are you ready to come to that point? How safe do you feel working with somebody? Is there a point to it? So often my work is aimed around roles, tasks, and organizations. So it's a senior leader who is retiring and is anxious for his team. It's a senior leader who has to grow the business dramatically, and needs to grow the leadership team skills. But ultimately, you've got Cullen in the middle with Cullen's feelings as a leader, needing to sort of get out of his own way.
It's a good point. And how often does someone's individual circumstance, like everyone goes through a shift as they get older, and I feel I'm not saying that I'm learned it in any respect, but I have gone through a shift myself where it was all about ambition, being the best, making money, making a name for ourselves in business. And then having Benji, as we talked about, is kind of shifted, and I'm going to a meaning phase in my life. And those things are still important, but not as important as that. Do you find that the different shifts people go through in their life affects not only their leadership style, but how they engage with someone like yourself, Andrea?
Yeah. Yes, of course. Yes. I mean, just what you've described encapsulates it. The 7 ages of man stuff and our life cycles, what we care about changes over time usually, but it's not the same for everybody. So for me, I am loving the work I'm doing, and I see my future as expanding out. And that's, I'm not on a reduction path. I'm on an expansion of
it's
thought.
expansion.
But for others, I've got a friend. They are, they're on a different path. They have a children with grandchildren. Their purpose is different. So it's really up to it. The point is, yes, there are stages, but making assumptions based on what you expect somebody would have is the issue. That you can take a step back. Not for me, not to make assumptions about, your colleagues based on how you look or how you sound or what you wear or where you come from or all that stuff. That assumption stuff starts to make people just shortcut to making dodgy decisions and dodgy assumptions.
I'm endeared by what you're saying about not making assumptions. I think I read a book many years ago, Don Miguel Ruiz, Toltec Wisdom, The Four Agreements. And I think he talks about, always do your best, be impeccable with your word. Never make assumptions is another big one in there too. And I just think those four agreements are fantastic.
And it's so interesting because if you start to look at biases, all the rage right now, pick a bias, unconscious bias, knowledge bias, blah, blah, blah. The reality is we cannot help but bring our experience to frame how we think, and the biases are there to help us make rapid decisions. Otherwise, we just never get anything done.
Good point.
It's so true. Never get out of bed in the morning because it would just be so overwhelming.
Yes. Yes.
So it's not about being a puristly unbiased or exquisitely devoid of assumptions. It's about the capacity to say, in this situation, I am hiring, whatever if the situation is I am building a leadership team, I wonder why mine are all men, whatever. Or I wonder why when I'm picking between a man and a woman, why am I thinking the woman is not quite ready, but the guy has more chutzpah? Is that my assumption? So it's about knowing when and where to be able to stop and go, is there something that might be, lenses are a very popular idea right now. Do I have a lens, that thing that happens at the opticians, do I have a lens that's making me say, exactly,
yes.
Is this right? Is that right? Is this blurry?
No, it's clear. It's clear. It's not. I'm colorblind, so everything.
I don't know exactly. Everything's blurry. So there's a thing I think about biases being talked about as if one can wash them away. So one is a perfectly clean slate. It's just not realistic. The realism is noticing, just trying to notice a little bit more about yourself and your environment, and just going, I wonder why it's like that, and is it me? Just that bit. Could it be me?
No, it's a good point. Some good points there, and very timely given everything that's happening in the market right now, especially in law. I know it's happening in finance and all sorts of places, but in the professional world, this idea of quiet quitting and the mass exodus and the mass migration, or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. I heard of a term the other day, quiet thriving, where you do 100%, but you don't do anything over and you thrive in your life. I'd love to know your thoughts on that phenomenon, on employees, obviously being empowered, working from home, or doing all these things. How does a law firm owner and the leadership of a law firm control, the employees now that seem to have a lot of power, and will vote with their feet and go somewhere else if they're not liking the status quo at that firm?
Do you know, that's such an interesting question, Cullen. There is, and you use the word control, which I just loved. I thought that was fascinating. Because this is there's been a power shift.
Yes.
And also my personal opinion is that the pandemic has reminded people of what they care about. And also it's reminded them of mortality, because people have died. It
really has. Yes.
So
yes.
Somebody's saying you must do to the KPIs of X. Somebody's going, my grandma died and I could not be with them. and I don't like you anymore.
Yeah, and what you're asking me to do isn't really important to me.
Yeah,
Might be
and I
important
don't
to
care
you,
about
but
it.
not really
I'm going to buy a
important to me.
tiny
Yeah.
house and move to whoop whoop and grow goats.
Power to you.
But until you can, I think this is an aspect. I was talking with a law firm leader the other day, and we were talking about this is about we live in our little personness thing, and we look out the windows at the front and we see the world from our perspective. There's all the talk of empathy and empathicness, and it feels complicated, but all it is saying, I wonder what it might be like for them. And therefore, with that in mind, I wonder how my needs, my organizational passion about delivering the foremost family-centric, whatever.
Whatever it is, yes.
Yeah, whatever, or developing technology or building cars or sending rockets to the moon. How might that play in their world? So it's a generous / vulnerable perspective. And the challenge, I think, in law firms is accommodation. Emotions are, this is a black letter technical environment often, of individuals who have a tendency to high levels of over anxious overachievers. So you've got people
anxious overachievers. I haven't heard this concept before.
So it's quite, I think there's a heap of stuff on good old Google. But the anxious overachievers are high performing, smart, educated. So you've got these communities. It's a bit like that thing when Palo Alto was developing, and they were talking about the aggregation of people with neurodiverse attitudes who were the best programmers.
Yes.
If that rings a bell. This is not dissimilar. You've got communities of very similar, no, not the same, but they have a similar set of attitudes to, intellect is first, emotions are not to be tolerated because they are risky. So that can lead to the problem of, if you get you're trying to get those people to say, what's life like for you from the other side? It's not necessarily a skill set.
Correct.
Or it doesn't make, so the risk is saying to somebody, how are you? Actually, that's too much for a lot of, and it's not just law firms. It's for leaders, the risk, if I say to you, Cullen, how are you? And you tell me your journey to Benji, I might find that just too much. You might cry. Yeah. Oh my God, what am I going to do?
What do I say?
What do I say? So the emotional piece it's a bit of a new frontier for organizations. The shift, I think, is the organization may not be everything. It's not reasonable to expect the organization to be everything to the employee. And so
such a good point.
You can shift your perspective to say, what might life be like for them? And therefore, how might we fit? How might we get the best out of each other? And it could be that thriving thing. One of my most challenging employees ever was so challenging because they did exactly what I told them, but they were not motivated by the organization.
Ah, there you go.
And for me, as the, come on, everybody, we all, hoo-hoo. They're the best. They're still they're now the longest serving, one of the longest serving people that they do what you want, but they don't smoke the company weed. So, I mean, they're not gonna take on that messaging because their world is about life and home and their society. Work is a means to pay for that.
It's such a good point. It's such a good point. And like, people don't leave jobs for more money. Usually it's their manager and the culture. And you can't overestimate that culture piece.
Yeah. Do I feel valued? Do I, is that genuine? But that idea of I've always been curious about organizations that expect everybody to want to get promoted. And that if you don't, you're damaged in some way. This is nature. And I was listening to something this morning from the New York Times talking about this idea that organizations can just grow and grow and grow. Nothing. Yes. We have entropy. Things grow, they die, and then they're reborn. But organizationally, we're in this delusion that that everything will grow forever and we will all just get better and better and wealthier. And societally, we're seeing, and systemic, globally, systemically, we're seeing that that's not true.
It's such a
just
good point.
to kind of bring our perspective out.
Yes.
From my employees, insist on working from home to, we're all part of a bigger picture, and people now feel it.
Of course. And with that being said, is there any particular passion projects that you're working on right now to, help the law firms you're dealing with this, or any other passion projects you want to share?
So I think, it's fair to say that having talked about how people don't necessarily need employers who bang on about how much they love their work,
yes.
I love my work.
Great.
I love the unknowingness. I love the anxiety makingness of it. I love the fact that I may never know the thing that happened for someone. I may never know what the resolution. I may spend 4 sessions with somebody, and then I let them go back into the wild, and then wonder, how did they ever got up that tree?
How did that go?
Exactly, what did they get? And it is absolutely not for me to ring them up and go, did you do that thing? Did you succeed? So that for me is that's what drives me.
Yes.
That if I can help leaders predominantly, because that's where change starts, and others, but leaders see a little bit more of themselves and understand how that helps or hinders them.
Yes.
Then I have done a little bit for the organization.
It's almost like if you ever watch The Italian Job, you probably have back in the day, but there's a character who breaks into safes but never actually looks inside. So it's like you're the safe cracker, but you never actually want to look inside. And maybe one day you'll want to look in and go, how did that person go? And come back to them and go, I'm proud of you,
You just have to let it go. Think Frozen. You haven't got there yet.
Yeah, let it go.
Let it go. And that can be really hard when you are very, these things are deeply personal. They are I'm going to use the word therapeutic. I'm not a therapist, but that sort of relationship is really predominantly based on, can we talk to each other? Do we feel safe? Yes. And then all the learning and training comes into place. But the majority of the benefit comes from, I feel okay with you, and I feel safe to do this stuff, whatever it is.
Whatever it may be.
So for me, and I think you're a prime, you're an example to me of this, which is in the curiosity piece, what's happening for other people. So you, I think, take this to a pinnacle. Who is out there? That's sort of the generosity of, when you meet somebody, it's what can I do for them? That I think I have a proto aspect of that. So I like to build my network. I'm always curious to meet new people. I'm always curious to hear what's on their mind, and not in a, the aim is not to then become a forensic scientist and start digging around in their brain going, ooh, look at this, that's horrible.
What's going on? Yes.
What's going on? Mapping to where they are. But I try and be open to meeting anyone that's wants to talk. Then I'll spend time doing that, because who knows what I'll learn, who knows what they'll learn, and where it will take us.
Who knows where that one coffee could take you? That's what I always say to my team. You never know.
Exactly. You never know. And you will always learn something, and it just helps you flesh out that worldview.
Correct. And it's a little known fact, and it should be widely appreciated, that everyone has a network of 130 people. Even though you may be having a coffee with them and they may not be a lawyer, for instance, some of my best opportunities have come from non-lawyers who go, you know what? I know Shirley at X firm, and she knows this person. I'm going to introduce you. And it's like, I would never have thought that. So don't negate a coffee. Go out and do it. I highly encourage it. And always what you said, the give, that Gary Vaynerchuk model, give, then ask. It will come back to you in spades. Always look, who can I introduce this person to? And people know when you're just going in there for a sale.
I totally agree. So the generosity, being able to go in and say, how are you? What's happening for you?
Yes.
Being willing that it's not just a one way sort of like, I've been in meetings where you just come out and you think, I, if it's entirely one bi-directional, it's unidirectional, it can be, a bit strange, but that ability to talk openly and be able to be there and hear, then you never know what comes out of it. So,
I agree.
So yes,
I agree.
so that's my passion, is that there's only a few of us in the universe, insofar as we know. We might as well
right
be
now.
curious about each other. Exactly. So
of course,
yeah.
a fellow human being, and that might be a nice little segue into our next little topic. What would you like to see change in the law or in the wider professional world as a whole?
Well, that we're just such pros at this, because it fits into. I would love to start to see a rising curiosity in law firms about what it is to be a leader in those organizations. Because if you
Yes.
look at, there's work, books about this stuff, but broadly, most lawyers do not aspire to leadership. They aspire to technical excellence, because that's the nature of their world, the world. But it means leadership in law is a strangely fraught topic. It's not aspired to. Somebody ends up with holding the baby. Occasionally you get somebody who wants to do it. And I was talking with a colleague of mine, Simon Tupman, the other day about this. He's written a book called The Heart of Legal Practice, I think it is. But
it's in there. It's definitely in there. Yes.
The aspiration of leadership is huge. But in any other corporate world, people would be fighting their way over the bodies to get to the top. So it's just so, I love it. I'm fascinated by professional service firms. So in an individual that's learning to be a lawyer, a student, whatever, all the way up to go, I wonder why we behave like this. I wonder why I behave like this. I wonder why I feel like this. That sort of reflection about yourself in the context of a group. And lawyers are trained as individuals and valued as individuals.
Well, I've got a good follow-up question. It might be a bit clickbaity, so forgive me, everyone. But can lawyers make great leaders as a general rule?
As a general rule, I think the system doesn't, and the structure doesn't encourage that. So it's not a topic that's touched upon in the legal education process at all. You might do a legal practicing certificate, but it's a couple of days, maybe. It's pretty brief. And then in the end, even in big firms, the person that ends up at the top of the legal person that ends up at the top of the heap often tends to continue fee earning, because that's the way they maintain their credibility in their organization.
That's a good point.
So because lawyers value lawyers, it is an interesting, and yet the legal systems are under pressure. Access to law is problematic. It's a luxury of the wealthy. If you have money, you can pay for lawyers, but 80% of law doesn't get done. Made up statistic, but it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course.
People, 98% of statistics are made up.
It's made up, of course.
Yeah. People have gone out from. People have taken. People would tend not to put their money with a law firm, and yet it's the venture capitalists, the investors, are looking at markets that are inefficient, under technologically underinvested, and ripe for innovation. And so we're starting to see the investment in this sector to ramp up. So I think we're just in interesting times. That was a sort of segue, but
yes, I think we are too.
It's about the curiosity. I know I feel settled here. I know perhaps this is where I'm going to head in this firm. I wonder what my ecosystem, thinking ecosystemically, think about yourself as a reef. If we're one of those wavy plants that do X in the reef, what else is around us? Is there a shark? Do we care about the shark? Whatever. That sort of thinking, so that you move from, I'm in a law firm and my goal is to grow my legal team, to who are we and where are we going in this whole ecosystem, and what role might I play in that?
And I
so
think,
just making people curious about that.
making people curious. And there'd be a lot of young professionals and young lawyers watching, I dare say, and watching the repeat of this. If you could talk to them before they get into their career or they're just started, what would you party in now? And they are aspiring to be at the top of the heap. They are aspiring to lead and affect massive change and add value. What would be your advice there, Andrea?
So mine would be broadly look over the fence and see what's out there.
Yes.
Look beyond the technical black letter of the law.
Yes.
And if that feels too uncomfortable, if you feel the urge not to do that, reflect upon that. Where might your head and heart be at that's keeping you there? It's not a problem. We need all kinds of thinkers.
Yes.
But perhaps you could look over that fence a little bit, and the fence might be the digital fence, your smartphone, you pick something up and think, why is this so easy and yet something that's hard here? Broaden your mind. Just think about what it's like over the fence. There might be
Broaden
more
the
for you.
mind. I love that.
And I thought I'd go for one of the profound thinkers of the moment.
Please.
Ted Lasso. Be curious.
Please. Yes.
Be curious, not judgmental.
I love that. That's so true. It's almost like appreciation over expectation.
And it sits very much in the legal mindset is oriented to judgment. And so just even that is really quite hard work. But the aim is to, I think an unspoken thing is working in a law firm is not necessarily, it isn't terribly good for the mental health of the people in it. Many law firms are not happy places because of why? Who knows? Let's have a chat. I mean,
why is that? Why is that? Is it systemic in the culture? Because it's the same in finance. Most banks, as a general rule, aren't happy places.
Yeah. So why is it like that? And is that the only way? And can we notice it and talk about it? So, why would I like to see change? It's because, hey, women leave law firms because they're not nice places for women to work. Is the reality. But women have an organizationally appropriate excuse, which is I need to go and have a family. I'll go to in-house, so that the organization can accept that. But the reality is, law firms are not nice places to work for anybody, and particularly women. So, hey, wouldn't it be crazy if we could start to go, I wonder why that is. What might be and it starts with a leader. I wonder where my perspectives, the things that I look through, what am I thinking about that's setting the tone for this?
It's so many good points. Are there any good books for people to read about that? Because I remember I read it many years ago, Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. It talks a lot about this. Is there anything you'd recommend?
I think for law firm leaders, actually, that Laura Empson's good at just setting the tone. Professor Laura Empson, who's pretty active out on LinkedIn. If you go look for her, she's got books, Politics,
Shout out to the
Prima Donna,
professor,
and
please.
Power, the prof. Then the prof. Anybody who's interested in why is it different for gender and others is a book called The Authority Gap by Mary Ann Siegert. It's maybe from last year. Excellent. Read it and be annoyed and go and do something.
Okay, I'm putting that up. The Authority Gap by Mary Ann Siegert. Please.
And then I think a lot of people in law get partway through, and you talked about life stages. It's pretty common people reach a certain part in their life and go, what am I doing? I don't know. I'm loving it. Where am I trying to get to? There's a great book by a woman called Herminia Ibarra. Great name.
And fantastic name.
Tremendous. Working Identity. And it's about how that experience of am I in the right skin? Is this the thing I should be doing? And it's a very practical discussion on how you can start to play with new potential working identities and think about that process. Hermione.
There you go. I'll put it in there. I just thought I'd put it in there like Cher, Hermione. Yeah. Hermione. I'm sure I got it wrong. I should have Googled that before, but there you go.
We should have prepped that one. So but anything, I mean, it is a case of two things. Just find other stuff to read that's outside of your scope. Anything new is useful, whether it's what is it? It's an practical electronics magazine where they break down how things work. How interesting is that?
That's very interesting.
But everything, The Economist, if you're not reading something about the wider world, Harvard Business Review, because that's always got stuff that's trundling along. It's all within your scope. And you'll find something thoughtful.
I highly recommend that. And when I connect with someone, and you just got me thinking there, Andrea, that when I connect with someone, I usually ask them, what are they reading at the moment? And I have got hundreds of book recommendations just from that. And one gentleman got me onto this one that I'm really enjoying at the moment. It's called Reality Transurfing. And it's all about how, there's different energies that people give off. And he talks about this thing called the pendulum. And there's mainly negative pendulums that people put out in the world. But you can focus your attention on not feeding that pendulum. So if your boss comes to you, says, we need to get this done, here you go. You're like, this is the way it's done. Instead of going, hey, why should I do that? You go, I agree it has to be done, but does it need to be done by me? Should we find someone else? And it's like, oh, yeah, maybe you're right. It's just amazing when you have that curious mindset, what you can achieve. And that's one question I love to ask is what people are reading. And you're a fountain of knowledge. And I think we've got some good recommendations here, Andrea.
Thanks, Colin.
No, my pleasure. But look, we've come to the end of the stream and we'll ask some bonus questions as well. But, when all is said and done, that whole, memento mori piece, when all is said and done, how would you like to be remembered? Andrea Foot.
I came over all existential with this one.
Yes.
And I had a moment of, one of my old bosses, as a joke, once said, "Everything is nothing." Sounds a bit fatalistic, but it's about putting yourself in context with the bigger. Let's be sensible, people. So for me, it's not about legacy. It's about paying attention to be present, useful, kind, thoughtful with whoever I am with in that moment.
Yes.
And I think that's enough for me.
I think that's very special. And in the moment with that person.
And to trust that's enough.
I like, I'm endeared by what you're saying. I think so too often we experience something and we're always thinking of the next event or tomorrow or, it's that striving and never arriving. Wouldn't it be great if you could just live your life moment to moment and with people, totally with that person? Like what a difference you could make. And you're already making that every day, Andrea. And thank you for being ever present and effervescent on this live stream today on Our Law Live.
Thank you, Cullen. It's been awesome.
Absolutely. And where can people find you? Where are you hanging out the most? Other than
find me on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, please. I'm sure you'd welcome a cheeky connect, coffee, or if you're absolutely, absolutely.
Virtual, and have a chat. We never know where these things go.
Absolutely. Circulate to percolate, as I like to say. Get out from behind the desk, face to face, belly to belly is where it's at.
So true.
It is, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. We'll bring you right back. And if you enjoyed this, guys, we are coming live every Wednesday speaking to a legend of law. We'll come out with the podcast later this week. And feel free to reach out to Andrea directly. She'd welcome it. Bye for now, everyone. Take care. Bringing you back, Andrew, we've got 2 bonus questions for you. How would you explain your role in law to a 6-year-old?
Oh, yeah.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
I was going to talk about the psychodynamic underpinnings of the... I thought, well, maybe not. So I came up with, I help leaders play better with themselves and each other at work.
Very simple, concise, cogent.
I put nicely in there and I thought, no, it's not about being nice. It's just playing better with each other.
Play better. You don't have to be nice. But it's all about being better than who you were yesterday. Very apt, very apt. And the final question, if you could give yourself advice at any age, like you could go back in time and give yourself this advice, what age would you be? And what would the advice be?
So this is something that pops up repeatedly with senior people at all levels, all the way up to the board, to board members.
Yes.
And it's, if you're feeling it, someone else is feeling it too. So if you're sitting in a meeting thinking, I don't agree with that, or I'm not sure about that, or what does that mean, or I want, it's in the system, it's bubbling around, and then the issue is, can you talk about it? And if you can't, so in corporates, we collude with each other to not talk about things. We find ways to distract ourselves. But if you're feeling it, it's there, you should feel okay about speaking it. If you don't feel okay about speaking it, that's a signal for you to find a place to go where you can feel okay.
Very apt. I really love that. Like, it really puts it, like, it's like asking a question in class, right? If you've got that question, probably 5 other people have got the same question.
Yeah, and it's amazed. It's people. Somehow groups silence each other. There's a group dynamic that, as a group gets bigger, and as we get set in our ways, it can get harder and harder to speak. And so having the confidence to know that if it's with you, it's in the system, and finding a way to talk about it, it's not just you. It's there.
It's not just you at the end of the day. That's good. It's a good point. Well, you've left us all with some fantastic things to think about there, Andrea. Thank you once again for joining us. And bye for now, everyone. Take care. Thanks again, Andrea.
Thank you.